from there, I'll go into some personal rules I have, right? That I kind of stay true to. And if I'm not staying true to them, then I am breaking them on purpose to try and find creativity, right? So one would be catching the eye. I want to put things that I want the crowd to see front and center. And I want to lead and push energy on the floor to places where I want you to watch. I also like to accent movement, right? So my friend Aaron taught me about kaleidoscope kind of theory in choreography, where you take your team and you think about like the first line of athletes is the first little lens on a kaleidoscope. The next 5 athletes would be the next 6, and you can match your counts. Every one has a slide, right? And you make sure that each part of the kaleidoscope on one is making sense for the overall picture. Rob and Kathy also taught me about that, and just always stopping to check like what number 2 is, or the third count, what's everyone doing, right? Do those things flow and mesh and make sense? So I always try to think about choreography from that point of view. And that can, it sounds like it would take a really long time to go through each count and make sure each thing is right. But the more you do it, the easier it gets, and the more quickly you start doing it too. You don't have to think about it anymore. But it all takes practice for sure. I like to cover landings on skills that have unfavorable landings. Especially, I don't have 6 months to work with the kid to get their tumbling perfect or whatever. So if it's going to go in, then I might, and the landing isn't Simone Biles stick and stand, then I might give someone a chance to do a dance in front of the tumbling, or I might pop people up in front of the landing just to cover that up. And I kind of do that for any skill too. With momentum, in routine order, I think about starting out strong and then also choreographing to the judges. Awesome coach Charlie Asciuto taught me about just always thinking about how there are multiple judges on the stand, right? And so you don't want them to get too bored, but then you also don't want them to have nothing to watch, right? So trying to keep tumbling and overall and stunts going throughout different sections. And that's a great way to utilize your additional athletes too, but then also to create a bigger picture than just watching one thing happen on the floor. So aside from momentum and just making sure your order is something that starts out strong, finishes strong, builds, if you have a not so great section, then you want to do something great after it, right? Apart from momentum, just thinking about formations. Justin Kitchens always told me like use more formations, use more. It's hard to, get, unless you have a team of perfect robots that are all great, you're probably not going to have, easy times getting the right people to the right spot. So, you want to build more formations in between. Don't just move from stunts to jumps, right? Move from stunts to the first formation before jumps, and then get them there in a creative way. And now that maybe your athlete over here is a little bit closer to where they need to be for jumps, now that you've moved everyone a little bit closer to jumps, you can find something fun to do to get there. So adding more formations, and then also not rushing the solution. I feel like I've watched like Brett Lane and Jonathan Lewis, when they were working with my teams, I've watched them be able to be super patient during the process and not have to constantly choreograph. I see them take moments where they think and they pause and they take their time. And I think that's one of a huge lesson to learn for a choreographer, is to not rush the solution. Take your time, and your problem that you're seeing as a problem might become your creativity if you take your time and don't rush it. Obviously there's time crunches, but there's also a difference between rushing and doing something quickly, right? So you can do something quickly without having the stress or the the negative effects of rushing. So that mindset's really important in my opinion. So just to sum up, well, before we sum up, I'll look at some of my personal points that I talked about and just kind of how I would approach those. So here's a dance where I had a great dancer that wasn't in the middle at the end of the pyramid, and to get her, we got her in the middle, right? But she wasn't in the front yet. And I had already had so many of my good dancers on the right side of the floor for this formation. So I brought her into back center, and then I brought all of the great dancers from the right behind her again. And it happened in a great way that it was very fluid. And I enjoyed watching this. I enjoy watching it today, but we were able to get the right people in the right spot for the job without just getting them there in a way that maybe wouldn't have been as fun or didn't make sense. So highlighting what you want and then using personnel to create fluid creative moments, I think is really important to me. And then the dance still had plenty of movement and also made sense. So from there, we can look at a youth team, which I think for me, youth teams have a lot of different important things to think about. Your youth team isn't going to be usually the best motion team when you compare them with a senior team, right? So in terms of dance, sometimes you need to utilize skills more so. So this team was able to do shoulder sits, and we were able to do lifts, and we had some flexibility. So we did some back bends that were connected to partner work, and we dropped kids down to the floor, right? A good bit. So really we try to create levels, and there's actually only one motion in this dance that comes away from the body. And it's one high V motion right here. The rest of the motions are either connected to someone else or are bent armed and in close to the body. So those are easier for the younger teams, motions like that, because there's a point of contact, point of reference, right? Where they know to put their hands there, and they can do that every time. So the high V has a lot of variation, right? And so the younger teams need more points of contact to be able to adjust. And that can even be, arms into the elbow in, snapping here close to the body. So things like that are going to make a big difference for kids that, if you're getting on your score sheet, fully extend motions, then maybe just think about doing a motion that they can fully execute instead. Just little changes like that make a big difference, in my opinion. For main points, I will just review those again before we end. And, I think about looking for inspiration everywhere. There's performance and there's choreography happening everywhere. I mean, even in nature, if we get super holistic about it, trees grow and lean towards certain ways and towards the sun. And there's really just choreography everywhere. But you also want to build with what's in front of you, right? So whatever your athletes have, those are the tools that you have to choreograph with. So be conscious of that. Keep your vocabulary for skills. Make sure you have a lot of ideas to work from. And then, always think about space, your timing, and the energy that you're having those kids work with. And that's going to help you in creating something that makes sense, is purposeful, and is beautiful to watch. Have your rules for your choreography that you enjoy, the things that make it personal or make it unique, and then break those rules for creativity, right? And do that often without fear or without rushing. So that's my my spiel for choreography. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to to tune in and listen. And if you made it this far, then hopefully we'll be able to have a conversation with you in the future about choreography. I love talking about it. I love cheerleading. So feel free to reach out.